The ship Olterra began her life as the tanker Osage, constructed in 1913 by Palmer's Shipbuilding and Iron Company Limited in Tyneside, United Kingdom, for a German company. In 1914, Osage was sold to the Standard Oil Company in New York and renamed Baton Rouge. After another sale in 1925, she became part of the European Shipping Company Limited of London and was renamed Olterra. She later passed into the hands of the British Oil Shipping Company Limited before being acquired by Andrea Zanchi in Genoa in 1930. On June 10, 1940, as Italy entered the Second World War against France and the United Kingdom, Olterra was scuttled by her crew in the Bay of Gibraltar near Algeciras, Spain, to avoid capture by British forces. Between September 24, 1940 and September 15, 1942, Gibraltar was targeted by 6 submarine-borne attacks. 3 of these raids led to the destruction or sinking of several Allied freighters, amounting to a total of around 40,000 tons. 3 of the assaults were conducted using human torpedoes launched from the submarine Cirré, while the remaining 2 were executed by combat swimmers. Following the attacks by Cirré, the commander of the Decima MAS recognized that using a submarine as a mothership for human torpedoes in Gibraltar had its limitations. He determined it would be more practical to set up a secret base in neutral Spain. The first step was taken when Antonio Ramonino, a member of the Decima, rented a bungalow along the coast road near Algeciras, directly facing a bay where Allied convoys anchored. Operations from this location, known as Villa Carmela, were conducted by combat swimmers. Ramonino's Spanish wife helped him easily establish their home there. Between July and September 1942, frogmen from Villa Carmela used limpet mines to sink or damage 5 merchant ships. During these operations, the Olterra served as an advanced observation post. At the same time, Lieutenant Licio Vicentini, a veteran of previous submarine raids on Gibraltar, learned about the Olterra and devised the idea of turning it into a covert mothership for the maiali, the Italian nickname for human torpedoes, literally meaning pig. Posing as civilian workers, a team from the Decima, under the guise of raising the ship to sell it to a Spanish owner, took control of the tanker. The Olterra was towed to Algeciras for repairs, and with the help of 2 civilian crew members who had remained on board to protect the rights of the Italian company, modifications began. Some cargo holds and a boiler room were converted into a workshop for assembling and maintaining human torpedoes, while an observation post was set up on the forecastle to monitor Allied ships in Gibraltar Bay. To deceive British and Spanish authorities, the team created the appearance of civilian sailors overhauling the ship. Torpedoes and equipment were smuggled in disguised as materials for the repairs. A 6-foot sliding hatch was cut below the waterline to serve as the exit for manned torpedoes, launching from the flooding bilge beneath the workshop. The special unit overseeing these operations was named Squadriglia Ursa Major after the constellation. By late autumn 1942, the Olterra was fully prepared for her mission. The workshop modifications were complete, and all supplies smuggled from Italy had arrived in Spain without arousing suspicion. On December 6, 1942, following Operation Torch, a British naval squadron entered Gibraltar, including the battleship HMS Nelson, the battlecruiser HMS Renown, the aircraft carriers HMS Furious and HMS Formidable, along with several escort vessels. Vicentini organized a mission with 3 manned torpedoes, each crewed by 2 divers. The lead torpedo piloted by Vicentini and Petty Officer Magro, the second by Second Lieutenant Sella and Sergeant Leone, and the third by Midshipman Menisco and Petty Officer Verini. Their targets were assigned as follows. Vicentini would attack Nelson, Menisco would target Formidable, and Sella was assigned to Furious. The assault craft left the Olterra in the early hours of December 8. By 2:15 a.m., the first human torpedo had reached the boom defenses. Inside the British base, motor launches and sentries remained quietly alert, aware of the potential danger to the anchored fleet. One security measure implemented after the summer swimmer incursions was the deployment of an underwater bomb disposal unit, led by Lieutenant Lionel Crabb. Depth charges were dropped by motor barges every 3 minutes. It appears that Vicentini and Magro's craft was hit by one of these charges while they searched for a gap in the steel net protecting the harbor, resulting in its destruction. Their bodies were recovered by the British and buried at sea with full honors. The second torpedo also encountered strong British defenses after being spotted by a searchlight. Following a lengthy pursuit by anti-submarine boats, the Italian crew scuttled their craft and sought refuge on an American freighter, discarding their swimsuits before surrendering to Gibraltar authorities. The third torpedo, caught amid the general alarm, managed to evade the submarine chasers. However, co-pilot Leone went missing during the pursuit and was never found, while Cella abandoned the craft, thinking he was still near Gibraltar or stranded near the Spanish coast. Hoping to be captured or interned by the Spanish, Cella surfaced, only to discover he was just meters from the Olterra. His torpedo was recovered by the Italians the next day. The two captured divers misled their British interrogators, claiming the attack had been launched from a submarine, successfully deceiving Allied intelligence. Nonetheless, the mission ended in failure. After Vicentini's death, Lieutenant Ernesto Notari assumed command of the Ursa Major unit aboard the Olterra. Reinforcements, including personnel and materials, were sent from Italy. With improvements in boom defenses, the next missions targeted transport and cargo ships in the anchorage area around the naval base. The end of the war in North Africa and the subsequent Allied landings in Sicily made attacks on logistical ships a priority. In May 1943, Commander Borghese of Shiré was appointed commander of the Decima. The night of the 8th was chosen for the next assault, using bad weather and the moon phase to their advantage. Lieutenant Notari, along with his second, Petty Officer Ario Lazzari, led a 3-torpedo wave toward Gibraltar. The second torpedo was manned by Lieutenant Tadini and Petty Officer Matera, and the third by Second Lieutenant Cella and Petty Officer Montalenti. To avoid arousing British suspicion toward the Olterra, they targeted merchant ships farthest from Algeciras. The gale during the mission made it difficult, as the current forced them to maneuver around targets before attaching the limpet mines. At dawn, all Italian craft returned safely to their mothership. 3 vessels were mined: the 7,000-ton American Liberty ship Pat Harrison and the British freighters Massoud at 7,500 tons, and Camerata at 4,875 tons. The American ship was severely damaged and declared a total loss, with 1 sailor killed by the blast. Massoud sank to the bay's bottom but remained partially above water, while Camerata sank completely. To divert British attention to combat swimmers instead of manned torpedoes, Italian intelligence scattered diving gear along the shore. The second operation from the Olterra was a resounding success. On July 25th, Mussolini was removed from power, signaling Italy's imminent collapse. However, the Decima MAS remained undeterred by the changing tide of the war and political upheaval, continuing to plan and execute attacks on Allied shipping across all fronts. On June 10th, the unit was awarded the Medaglia d'Oro in recognition of its accomplishments. On the night of August 3, 1943, the Ursa Major conducted its final operation against Gibraltar. Once again, 3 craft departed from the Olterra to target 3 transport ships anchored in the bay. Notari led the Pigs along the Spanish coast to avoid searchlights directed toward the open sea. His second man, Petty Officer Andrea Giannoli, had received poor training in piloted torpedoes. While clamping the explosive charge to the keel of a Liberty ship, their torpedo spun out of control. Notari opened the diving valves, causing the craft to crash dive to 34 meters or 112 feet before resurfacing just feet from their target. Half-conscious and without any sign of Giannoli, Notari attempted to fix the malfunctioning torpedo, but the diving mechanism was disabled. Eventually, he escaped at full speed, aided by a school of porpoises that concealed his wake. Giannoli was left behind. After waiting 2 hours on the ship's rudder, he shouted for help. Once rescued, a motor launch with a member of Crabbe's diving unit was called to investigate. It was clear that the ship, the American Liberty Harrison Gray Otis, had been mined. The warhead detonated just seconds before British diver Petty Officer Bell could enter the water, killing 1 sailor and seriously injuring 8 others. The 7,700-ton Otis, like her sister ship Pat Harrison, was declared a constructive total loss. 2 other Allied ships were rocked by explosions at around 4 a.m. on the 4th of August. The 9,900-ton Norwegian Thorshovdi was split in 2, and the 6,000-ton British Stanridge sank in shallow water. The final mission of the Ursa Major destroyed 23,000 tons of Allied shipping. On September 8, 1943, Italy submitted to Allied terms, marking the definitive end of the war for the Olterra. Up until that point, the British in Gibraltar had no concrete evidence linking the tanker's presence in Algeciras to the attacks on their ships. As Leon Goldsworthy later reflected, "We never found any proof of the role played by the Olterra in this affair. From British naval headquarters in Gibraltar, we could see the Olterra's superstructure clearly beyond the exterior mole at Algeciras. The possibility that the Olterra was somehow involved in the human torpedo attacks wasn't lost on us, but we never had any visible evidence of her actual participation." The Spanish authorities attempted to conceal the evidence, but after the Italian armistice, Crabbe's diving team boarded the Olterra and discovered spare parts from 3 different torpedoes. With these, they were able to reassemble a complete manned torpedo, which they named Emily. However, the craft was lost after 6 trials in open waters. After the war, Crabbe met several of his former adversaries, including Lieutenant Notari, the last commander of the Ursa Major. Although the ship was dismantled and scrapped in 1961, parts of her outer plating, including the ship's name and a few portholes, were salvaged and displayed at the Italian Naval Museum in La Spezia. These artifacts are exhibited alongside other Decima Flotilla MAS items. In 2021, the T. Mariotti shipyard in Genoa was commissioned by the Italian Navy to build a submarine rescue ship named Olterra. The vessel is also designed to support Italian naval special forces in their operations.